Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist. Now, if you hear me sounding a little hoarse or I'm coughing, I am dealing with allergies as the joys of living in California and during this, end of spring, beginning of summer, all that pollen is out in the air. So that's why I sound a little rough, even though you're probably hearing this right now in September. But before I get even further into this episode, let's start with the fact of this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only, does not constitute working with a licensed mental health professional in your area, and I do strongly recommend finding one to talk about your unique issues. Now, to that end, today for this podcast is a celebration of sorts because this is my 2-year anniversary of creating this podcast and bringing you all the individuals that you have heard and listened to. And so today's guest that we're going to be talking about is someone who contacted me a while ago, and life gets in the way and circled back to me as they had let me know they had finally started their practice. And as I'm looking at their practice and information, it's like, yes, would you be interested in doing an episode? Especially because unlike plenty of my other associates out there in the podcast world, there are plenty of people who are out there talking about starting their own practice and what it means to go into that, practice building health. And so with his unique practice, I thought this would be a perfect chance to bring up out there for those that are not just clinicians of color, but also geeky clinicians of color, what it goes into building our practices. And so today, I'm going to introduce you to Sekayi Edwards. And if I messed up his name, he'll basically correct it for me once he comes on. But Sekayi Edwards is a licensed marriage and family therapist located in San Francisco Bay and owner of HiddenQuest Therapy. And believe me, when I read that name, I felt complete envy and jealousy because I could have picked that for my name for my therapy practice as well. Sekayi helps geeks and gamers, creatives and artists, and spiritual seekers who want to connect to their personal capabilities, communities, and are calling in the outer world as much as they do in their inner world of their passions and interests. Sekayi has a special commitment to the BIPOC community and those who hold identities that have been marginalized. In his work, Sekayi utilizes a combination of video games, role-playing games, expressive arts therapy, and spiritual practices to support children, youth, adults, and family. Sekayi particularly enjoys running therapeutically applied role-playing games for teens and young adults, therapeutic drumming circles for all ages in various settings, and workshops for caregivers, teachers, and providers on the use of video games in mental health. Sekayi's future goals include developing video games and tabletop games for therapeutic use and leading rituals of passage wilderness groups for BIPOC youth. So, Sekayi, welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here and to celebrate this 2-year anniversary with you.
Likewise. So, as I ask everybody, how did you get here? How did you get started in all of this?
Yeah. How did I get started? I think, I think I knew this question was coming. I've been listening to your podcast and really enjoying it. So to be here, getting a chance to answer, I was like, there's no right or wrong, but I'm just going to go with ignoring my mom's wish to stay away from social work. She was a social worker. And as I was in grad school for therapy, she didn't really say why. And I still, I don't know. She did pass away like in 2012, but thank you. But the process of going through grad school and becoming a therapist really connected me to her even more strongly and helped me kind of get through that. And so, and just make it my own. I think she was nervous that there's a lot of weight and responsibility and that goes into this work. And I feel like she was trying to shield me from it. in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I also saw that she really gave so much to the families that she worked with, and that really inspired me. And actually, so I think I got here because I actually started working with her as a teacher's assistant at an early childhood learning center when I was 16.
Oh, very nice. So she worked more agencies and such as opposed to a private practice?
More agencies. She was just starting to, she had done some private practice. She always wanted to do more. But I think, it was kind of a tough transition to make when you have 3 kids.
And so 3 kids, and that would probably be a big factor in that standpoint about some of the choices we make, which often comes up with our line of work, especially, I mean, let's be frank, we are in a field that is underrepresented as being an importance in the medical field. It's underrepresented, especially for male therapists, as it is, let alone therapists of color. And then, of course, we become even more of a smaller population with us being geeky and more spiritually centered, as opposed to some of the other methodologies that are out there. But equally, I mean, we can also, as we both have had our time working in agencies as requirements of becoming therapists, it's a very different world in agency than in private practice.
Right. And I think that's really what was calling me, is just there's always this, I felt for me that there was this expectation that agency work was it. That the message I received was there aren't many Black men in this field, and as a Black male, that I was gonna mean so much to the community, and that was where that's the way I would best serve community. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? But I think this whole process of me, thinking about what's sustainable. And how I can expand my reach and do the work in a way that is going to help me grow as well. It's just really coming to more of where I feel I need to be in the world, and not necessarily where others feel like I need to be. And if we're in alignment, great. But I did really have to think about it for myself, where I want to be. And for me, it's in both spaces. I really enjoy the community mental health aspects. I really enjoy private practice as well.
Nice. And so I guess one of, as you've been listening to this podcast, but as you get a chance to speak to others who are listening to it, who are on the therapy path, or already therapists and still sort of thinking about what they want to do, whether they're still an agency, or even those who might be listening and considering becoming a therapist, what do you think is probably your take or a bit of wisdom about being a therapist of color in this field? And you want to throw on what it feels like being a man in this field, all that too.
Yeah, I mean, for speaking from my own experience for myself personally, I think it was hard for me at first. It's, still has its challenges, but I think at the beginning, being in grad school, being one of the only Black students and Black males, I felt I couldn't really hide. And I'm introverted by nature, and I wasn't necessarily looking to hide, but I just stood out. And with that came everybody's expectations. And so I really had to just remember why I was there for myself. And for the clients I was working with, and just not taking on other people's hopes and expectations. And in a way, it was motivating. It was supportive. It came from a really good place of support. But I did have this feeling that when people would say things like, "Yeah, you're needed in the community. You need Black men," I felt like who I was, as in all the other aspects of my identity, was kind of lost in that. Like, I wanted to know that I was a fit for all of me, not just because of my race. And I learned to trust that that's the intent. That was the intention. That people, they were it was implied, it was implicit that it was all of me who I was, but it took me time to trust that that I wasn't just being seen just for my race or gender, because I was way back when I first started as a teacher's assistant, I would work with a lot of boys. They would send all the boys to work with me. I'd be paired with the boys, and so they would notice that that's what was needed, and that's what the children needed. It was a older male figure. So my practice being centered around geek culture and the creative arts and spirituality is really my way of bringing in those other identities and centering those, and not just race.
Well, and I think that that's one of those interesting places, what you're talking about, the idea that there are more components to our identity. Many would have said that, well, why aren't you in a sports program? Why aren't you getting the gangs kids off the gangs? Is like, but have you ever paid attention to the ones that are quiet in the corners?
Right.
They need help just as much, but that does not mean that you're going to be able to talk about LeBron James game with them. You might be talking much more about Spider-Man,
right? Or
you might be talking about Transformers with them, or equally, you might be talking about Harry Potter too.
Exactly.
So it's not, again, we're not a monolith about what it means for our kids and for ourselves to grow up and what we're interested in, let alone the fact that our interest in those areas have often also made us considered unacceptable in our society.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like there's a there's a moment when I really realized that for myself, and I think it was the first time in grad school that I was really learning about systems of oppression and internalized racism, and but I always lived with this hypervigilance around stereotype threat. And also, and I grew up with people, saying I was white because of my interests or the way I talked or this or that, right? And so that was still internalized. And when I would work with clients or young boys, sometimes I would feel like that would get in the way of my work. And I remember going to this barbecue. We're celebrating, I think it was like a summer barbecue that my clinic was throwing, and one of my clients, he was graduating from a program. And I was in a great mood. I loved just this idea of like celebrating with a barbecue at a clinic. It was just what a great way to come together. It wasn't heard of. I hadn't heard of any experiences like that in the field. So I just felt at home. And when I arrived, I remember greeting young man, and he extended his hand and kind of gave me this firm, solid handshake, and I felt good about it. Like, and then he moved on, and there was somebody else, another older Black man, who he did the whole the whole dap, like the handshake, brought him in for a hug. It felt like it was more. Like they were more relaxed, they were more personable, they were able to relate to each other more, connect with each other more. And I remember feeling like, am I just like this stiff clinician that really can't relate to my client in that way with more ease or relatedness? But then as I thought about it and really thought for my client, I was like, wow, how amazing is it that he gets to show up in these different ways with different men of color. Who express themselves in different ways, or who show up in different ways. And we're not pigeonholed to be any one way, where there's no one way. And there's no, right? There's no one way to be a Black or a Black male or to show up, right? And that moment just made me think of, I just always connect to that whenever I have this feeling of not being this enough or that enough. Just no, it's multiple ways of being, and the more I can be myself and show up myself, create space for others to do the same.
Nice. which is, again, one of those areas that doesn't always get thought about with our field where, I mean, I don't know about you, but there are times where it's like, do you all assume that just because we're a therapist, we all work the exact same way, like you would if you went to just get your general doctor, and that we all can work with the exact same things? I mean, we all like get some of the same basic training, but we all start branching out after that.
Right.
And with that branching out also, again, for us, comes up that aspect of, we are a degree of what we work with masculinity, but even more getting into what it means to be a geek or blurred. I'm kind of curious, what was it for you about centering your practice around geekdom and being able to let our geek and blurred flags fly?
Yeah, I think it's the thing that helped me just feel more of myself. And also, I think it helped a lot of the clients that I've worked with be themselves as well, just to connect in this other way. It's just in its fun, relational way. I really believe that when people are passionate about something or have a really strong interest, there's this affinity and there's this shared culture that we have. And then that just really helps foster that relationship. So it's just helped me connect and create this, establish this really strong rapport in a way that's very quick. I've noticed that as well. It's like once you play a game where you mention, oh, I know this game, or I've seen this movie, or oh yeah, it's my favorite character. It's like this connection. There's this trust that there's this shared experience, shared understanding, shared identity.
Could you say more about that? How, especially, it empowers both our clients and ourselves, and this blend of psychotherapy and geekdom.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of stigma around gaming culture, geek culture. There's also a lot of stigma with mental health and talking about your emotions, or what does that mean? Like if I work with a lot of teens, children, and their thought is that if they're in therapy, that means something is wrong with them, or there's a problem, or they need to be fixed, and I'm there to fix them in some way. Or I don't talk about my feelings. That's not what we do. So there's a lot of, and they're right to feel that way, because this field there's a lot of medical racism that has done a lot of harm for these communities. So they're right to feel that way and be suspicious and cautious. So,
let alone the idea about fixing too.
Right. So, and especially if geek culture is something that they really connect to and resonate with, it gives them a space to not feel any shame around it. I've had a lot of worked with a lot of folks who feel othered because of their interest. If they're adults, they're told that it's immature. Even if they're kids, sometimes it's told that they have to grow up, and it's you quit playing. You're playing all the time. What are these toys? So yeah, I think there's a way in which it helps folks feel seen. And I know that things have changed a lot in terms of geek culture, like being more present and visible in pop culture. I think there's still a lot of, especially for children of color, where they're told that because they like those things, they're whitewashed. Right. So even if it's widely accepted in pop culture, it's still not quite always accepted in certain communities or for people of color.
And yet, too, the standpoint of so much of the science and engineering technology that has been built by our people to make this world work is a perfect example of the things that would have been said, these people don't fit in, even if they weren't full geeks, but the interest in science, the interest in mathematics, the interest in and that seeking out and trying to wonder why. How?
Right.
And those things are somehow seen as lack of usefulness, or that escape, or even asking that question is somehow an escape that isn't allowed.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a sense that it's not for us. I went on a rock climbing. I co-facilitated a group with a senior clinician who leads a rock climbing group in this park with young Black men in high school, and they were there was this science project. It was like I guess it was there was a tree trunk, and there was like a lens covering it, a glass lens, so that when the sun would pass across the sky, the light would go through the lens and kind of burn on the tree, on the log, so that you can track the sun's movement over the years. Really interesting. I just remember one boy made a comment like this is white people stuff. And it's like, and throughout the whole experience of being in the park, they saw there was a summer program, there was a camp with mostly white children in the camp. A lot of the joggers running by were white, and I just remember this group of boys were just talking as if they didn't belong, as if like the space wasn't created with them in mind. And like you said, right, we're the scientists, the inventions that we've contributed to and set the groundwork for, and they can't see that because the way they've been socialized, and it just shows you how deeply ingrained these messages are around what's for us, right? What are we allowed to be interested in? Like what's available to us? And it feels like that's been it's kind of taken away.
Even to the standpoint of us working in mental health, that our mental health can't be done by us, for us, with our own interests in mind, that doesn't fit a larger non-us paradigm. And that can equally become to the standpoint of how many of us stay in agencies, and especially if the agency ends up being not the best workplace. So I'm curious, what was some of the resources and advice or things that you sought in figuring out what you wanted to do with your practice?
There's a lot of different things. It's a good question. In no particular order. I did have a lot of colleagues from grad school, some of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, who I reconnected with, and they had started practices, and they were really encouraging me to do the same. And that was the first time I had this feeling like, oh, it can be done. There's people I know who started where I started who are doing it. So just getting their encouragement and support, and they kind of broke down the process of what they went through, helped just hearing other people's stories. I've also been a part of this accountability group. We call Gold Group, that's been going on for almost 10 years, where we meet a certain number of times per month, and we talk about our goals and what we've accomplished and what we hadn't. And it's just a great way to just give voice to the things you're doing, the things, or the different tasks that I had to complete. And it just helped me stay disciplined. Because there are going to be some weeks where I was really motivated to get a lot done, and sometimes I just wasn't really feeling it, or I wasn't inspired, or I was feeling doubtful. But just having that accountability, knowing that, okay, in a week I'm going to be meeting up with my friends, and so I want to, I don't want to break the cycle that we've created in this group, because we've all accomplished some really interesting things over the years. So that accountability helps. Also, my sister, who was starting a business, told me about SCORE East Bay, which is where folks provide free mentorship. folks in business and entrepreneurship offer free guidance to people who are looking to start their own businesses. So that was a huge support for me. Almost it was like a real mentorship. I felt really connected to this individual, and even got me my first client. So that was really helpful. And then also just friends and family and support. I think just a practice of communicating what my vision was, and just saying it out loud, hearing myself, hearing what flowed, what didn't, and what people responded to, resonated with, really helped me along the way. So I think that those are some of the bigger supports that I was able to access.
And what do you feel was the obstacle or messaging that with these great supports that you felt you had to overcome, that so many probably also are hitting that idea about whether or not they should go and start their own business as opposed to stay in an agency?
Right. Yeah. And I'll actually bring it back to like our relationship or connecting with you, reaching out. That's also been an amazing support, that networking and meeting people who are doing similar work. And just, I think for me, I had this starting out, this feeling that my gut reaction was like, oh, if somebody's already doing it, or oh, my idea isn't unique, or this person has more skill, or this, and I don't, that's just all in my head. Those are just the voices I've learned to quiet and realize that, this isn't a competition, right? That my way is going to be my way, their way is going to be their way. And why not learn from one another and support one another and find community in that.
Because don't know, finish what you're going to say.
Well, it's just, I mean, I think we just kind of exist in this capitalist system where we look at what other people are doing as competition, right? And I feel like that was a lot of the messaging that I would get through like some courses that I would take, or some books that I would read. But right. And so it's just like, no, I don't like that word competition. Like, these aren't my competitors. This is my community where we can all support each other. We can all grow. If you have that abundance mindset, right? It's like there is a high need for support, and we're doing better, providing better service for our clients if we work together. And right.
Oh yeah, because and I think you've hit something too. Is that we definitely as therapists need to get business training. It's useful for us to run the business, just like we got the training to become therapists. Right. But keep in mind, the business mindset, what I've also heard as a scarcity mindset versus the abundant mindset, pushes that idea of competition. And I mean, just using what we know here about the Bay, we've got maybe 12 million people in this Bay. That's north, south, east, and west of just surrounding the Bay itself. And probably, what would you think? Maybe 200K worth of therapists? Let's just say that's our part. So that's 200K worth of therapists between private practice and agency trying to care for 12 million people.
Right.
There's still a whole slew of people that we can't even reach.
Exactly. Right.
So why would we be in competition with each other? So just imagine that in your city or even in your state.
Right. Yeah. And then I think about the work it took me to find other therapists and who are doing similar work. Right. It's just a lot of research that goes into it. And sometimes it's easier than other times. But and when I was like looking for a therapist, it was hard. Right? It's hard to find these, right? And so when I think about it that way, in terms of building a community and a presence together, and having a referral network, and just increasing access to clients by working together, making it easier for clients, that really shifted my perspective as well.
Yeah, we have our niche. but we also have our niches that overlap with everybody. So we become that place of being able to refer, but we also have our differences. And we also, while we have similarities in some of the clients we work with, we also have areas where we don't overlap, which becomes a place where I can refer to you, you can refer to me, just for those aspect of we have similar, but not all the same matching skill sets.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place for us to take a pause here and come back for our second half here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Sekayi Edwards, licensed marriage and family therapist. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back in a little bit.
A little birdie told me Voice America is on Twitter. Follow us at Voice America TRN.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
On Living Strong, the flip side of adversity, Dr. Virdra Jackson presents stories and powerful guest experts from business, health, relationships, and faith. Every story has its flip side, and we are here to delve into the story and challenge you to view what has kept you in a singular mindset and turn it into the flip side. When you can effectively do that, you'll experience necessary growth. Tune in live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time and 2 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at voiceamericaempowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the second half of Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, and because I have this confirmed, as I have that track record that I have been mispronouncing the name, so I'm going to let them do that for you. So
it is Sekayi.
Sekayi.
Yeah, Sekayi.
Yeah, this is where my dyslexia gets in the way and trying to pronounce names. And there are times I'm going to screw it up because this is what makes sense in my head. Not that I'm trying to not respect people's names. It's just like, this is what makes sense for me to try and pronounce it.
Right. I understand. And it's not an easy name to pronounce either.
Yeah. And speaking of names, your practice name, like I said at the in your introduction, was one that once I read it and heard it, is like, oh, I should have thought about that for my practice as well. And I have that jealous, envy, covet aspect. So your practice is named as HiddenQuest Therapy. How did you come up with that name?
Well, I guess like you, main quest and side quest was taken.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it happened for a reason, because the word hidden speaks so much to me. I've always loved movies about secret worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to my name, I had a client tell me that he loves a genre of anime called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right now, but Isekai? It's Isekai, which is very close to my spelling of my name, which in Japanese is also pronounced as the world, And so that kind of stood out to me. I love those kinds of movies where like the protagonist is transported or discovers the secret hidden world. So like the Blade, it's not a new world for him, but the idea of the
underworld of all the vampires, existing in plain sight.
Right. Matrix, Harry Potter, Narnia, Wakanda, like these hidden worlds and the characters who walk between them. And I think about it as this it's a space where think about the hero's journey is where the protagonist or set of characters are confronted with challenges, and it helps them connect to their capabilities, their community, their calling. And for me, that's really what gaming and art and spirituality have been to me, like these hidden realms where I've learned about all the hidden and unseen forces that shaped who I am. As opposed to like the main or the side quests, because those are usually clear, maybe. But with the hidden quest, you might not even know it's there. You're on it. You might not even know, but you're definitely affected by it. You don't know where it leads or maybe what's required, but what's required to achieve that quest or what you'll gain. But the process of building awareness and creating perspective and understanding and exploring what's seen and unseen and integrating those two worlds, I think is the experience that I'm hoping to create for healing.
Yeah, because you didn't just have to do with what so many others just put their name as being their therapy practice. I mean, like with mine is Untangle and Grow Counseling. And my inspiration came from the Adinkra symbols of West Africa and a set of them, because I know there are plenty of Sankofas out there. Great power to you. Although I just kind of felt like it was highly overused. Everyone goes to Sankofa, but going back and other symbols sort of spoke to me, and taking them and how they translated came up to the aspect of the knot of reconciliation, which is where I get the entangle from. And then the fern, which is growth and even some of the most harshest environments, is where I get the grow from, which is also representing post-traumatic growth. So those are the things that inspired my name for my practice, Untangle and Grow Counseling. And of course, in that same way, at one point I was going to use the wisdom knot for the podcast, and that's where we got Untying Knots from.
Yeah, the symbolism is so powerful. And that's why I love your use of the Adinkra symbols and this connection to the name. And I thought about how to do that too as well. That was part of my process I was exploring. And like you're saying, sometimes it can feel overused. And but those aren't two that I've seen that often, and I've definitely clearly recognized them. So it definitely spoke to me immediately.
And especially then once I had the actual symbols put, because I knew I wanted them together in some sort of relation to each other, as opposed to they're usually seen as separate symbols. And culturally, they have reasons they're seen as separate ones, but it's like the combination of the two was also the thing of this relationship.
Right.
So, but that's all within a name. And so within a name is also what we practice. And so some of the things that you're very much practicing in your field at your practice is working with video games as well as role-playing games. So tell me a bit more about that for folks that are interested and the geeks out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. At first, I guess I was really lucky enough that the first clinic I worked at out of grad school, where I was able to play, they had an old PS2 and I was able to play with clients. But it was still something I felt like had to be like hush hush, like my supervisor knew, but it wasn't something that I like felt confident in really talking to other clinicians about or in group consult, until I met my supervisor, or I had met someone online, because I was really intrigued about geek therapy. He was a geek therapist, and through fate, a position opened up, a supervisory position opened up a year later at my clinic, and they were able to get the job. And so then I started to feel more confident in learning how to use therapeutic, well, just like the clinical language to substantiate what I was doing through like explore more like play therapy and using play therapy language. And then over the years, in another job at a clinic, I wanted to do the same thing, but I didn't feel quite ready to just say, I want to use video games. And so I was like, how about a role-playing group? A friend had introduced me to some live play podcasts, and I was just moved to tears by the end of the certain series, and I really wanted to play. And because I just love sci-fi and fantasy settings and role playing and character building and storytelling. And so I was kind of like sublimating my this shameful thing of video game playing, because I didn't feel confident yet bringing it to work professionally, by creating a role-playing game. And it felt more comfortable for me to introduce clinically because it was in person. They had aspects of drama therapy, play therapy, and I could really talk about it in a way that was going to make it feel more clinical in a way. So I kind of had to codify it. And it felt harder to do with video games, right? It felt easier in a way to use that language for role playing.
Which is an interesting take on it, and I think that's a lot of us that are the geek therapists have to struggle with that sense of having to justify, or as you said, codify language, the use of that, which is ultimately play. And for those listening, by this point, you've probably heard the episode with Sophia Ansari talking about play therapy. If not, go back to the archives, you'll see it. It was like a couple of months ago. We were talking about that. But this sense that we have to justify it as a sense of therapy, that it has, that these stories that are inside the video games and the role playing are useful to us, as opposed to everybody's been hit with Cinderella sanitized by Disney versus some of these other stories, and they're all storytelling, they're all narratives.
Right.
But not every story narrative fits every person.
Right. Yeah, and I think there was just a lot of stigma that I was around gaming, that I didn't feel confident in my ability to speak to justify it at that point. So, but I love the role playing games. So I was happy, and I really talked about it as in the way of just identity exploration, building social skills, for it's just stress relief, right? Just having a break from the challenges that a lot of the participants were experiencing in other aspects of their life. And also, but it also validated their identity as members of the geek community. So just having that identity for them to be seen and shared with other participants their age was very validating, and they loved it. And they were just like, this isn't therapy. This doesn't feel like therapy. I can't wait till next time. Or do we have to leave? Do we have to end early? And there's not enough time. And I just saw them really come alive in a different way. I felt alive in such a different way doing the work, and my co-facilitator, there was such a flow and such an ease, but it was work. It was clinical. We could see the shifts in the way the participants were showing up, the way they were understanding themselves, the way they were understanding the emotions of the group members, and they were really, it was a safe space for them to try new skills without worrying about, there wasn't too much at stake. So it felt like a safe space for them to learn and to grow. And but it was fun at the same time. And that's what role-playing games have. That's how I've been using them, just to really build this connection, having kids have a safe place to practice skills and to be seen and heard, to feel connected.
And this, I think, easily leads into our aspect of question about myths and realities around mental health. So much of what you just spoke about seems to be in contrast to the idea that, shall we say, we see in a lot of media that has been put forth, that it's a diagnosis and that there's a sort of a goal. And I'm paraphrasing from something we've already spoken about, the idea of fix.
Right.
So then I'm sorry, I wonder what your thoughts are about that idea of fix your identity development.
Right. I think within that there's this message that something is wrong with you. That you're broken in some way. That you are not accepted as you are. And there's no acknowledgement of all the stressors that they're likely experiencing and facing in their life. They're identified as the issue, not the crazy circumstances that they're in. And that this field is this benign, benevolent field that heals people. I feel there's a lot of harm that can be done, and that has been done historically. Like there was a diagnosis for slaves running away,
right,
and the treatment was whipping, right, and so amputation, right, and so that's kind of the origin of this field, and we have to reconcile that and know that especially in communities of color, marginalized communities, this field has done a lot of harm. And so to see clients who are maybe ready to engage in the process as like resistant, we use that word resistance, or if we feel like they're not doing the work, or they're not showing up, or they're not engaged, right? It's this, I feel like there's this dismissal of their own, like their own attempts to protect themselves from a system that has historically done a lot of harm. So yeah, and I think the reality part of it is that there are a lot of amazing clinicians who work with intention of reclaiming and really changing the system from the inside out, and like really redefining what the work looks like.
And you spoke about the history we have with mental health and the idea of the runaway slave syndrome, which was known as drapetomania. And I remember I was telling that at I forget exactly what type of function I was at, but I was giving a speech about it, and I had several people who were therapists who had never heard the term before. And the aspect is like, wait a minute, this was not covered in your history of therapy class, which I know I had to take from my school, and I've heard others have to take it. But then again, there's an example of what was the focus of the history, which was mostly all things like Freud, Jung, Skinner, none of the other people who have added that weren't necessarily all male or necessarily female or people of color in their history of our field. I mean, I'm almost, as we talk about law and ethics, we actually probably would be useful to actually have a course on this has been the abuse of done by therapy. We're going to know it before we walk out in the field.
Right.
So that we aren't doing that harm. And that would probably also be one of the things we would need to actually have in a improved cultural humility class.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something. Yeah. No, go.
No, I guess I was just thinking of just an example of that is there's some programs where we that are created to work in specific like housing communities, right? And it sometimes can feel like if the real underlying systemic issues aren't being addressed, and supporting the families on that level, that it's hard to do what we call like the traditional like therapy, because there are real basic needs that aren't being met. And sometimes when the communities, they're wanting that, not therapists or new programs coming in, trying to, use this new model, right? There's things that they've identified, their leadership, the community themselves know what's right for them and what they need. And so I think that's, part of that challenge that I've had with past work experiences, and really figuring out how to, show up in the way that the community is asking for providers to show up, and not just what the provider has in mind.
Which comes back to, again, that standpoint of somebody's trying to fix what they think is the problem.
Right.
And they don't fix the actual problem. They fix the perceived problem. Or what they perceive as the problem.
Right.
Which comes back to that standpoint of, you may have whipped them, our ancestors, or cut their hands off, but they still had the chain of slavery around them. When that was the actual thing that needed to be fixed.
Right.
And that's some of which I think we both can agree is what we don't try to bring into our practices. So with that in mind, where can folks find you as they want to explore more working with you in your HiddenQuest therapy?
Folks can find me on my website at www.hiddenquesttherapy.com. I know when I type it in, sometimes it's easy to forget the second T for therapy. But hiddenquesttherapy.com. You can also reach through my email address. It's Sekayi at hiddenquesttherapy.com. SEKAYI at hiddenquesttherapy.com. And I think the next phase has to be social media. Not quite there yet, but
hopefully by the time that this airs, you'll have at least an Instagram account, because I'm certain there's a number of people out there who will want to basically connect with you from that. So,
thank you.
All righty. So, thank you so much for being on here, and thank you for making this anniversary episode. It's kind of also fulfilling to know this is part of why I'm here and doing this, not just what we do in the therapy room too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, again, it's been such an honor, and congratulations to you. And your work is having a deep impact. And so, I'm really excited to connect and be a part of your circle.
All righty. So we look forward to hearing more from you, and I have a feeling we'll be having you back for a later episode. But this is Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, completing 2 years of these podcasts, and hopefully we'll be able to get another year out before it's time for me to hang up the mic, but we'll see. Otherwise, stay safe, be well, and see you soon on the Voice America Network. Bye all.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.